done to keep children, to foster up children, to keep the neighborhoods safe. So we did interviews
of feminism if we don't have the word I, if we start from the word we.
The monetarian thing behind to convince the other system that doesn't mean that you have to become economical, but it just have to, that it has to be recognized.
Okay, so hello and welcome to the Agency for Better Living, to the assembly, the third assembly, today on feminists and urban planning, feminists and housing, the city and feminism. So I'm very happy. I wish all the visitors who will come take part. Welcome also to our animals. They will be the loudest in the film. Every time louder. So let me introduce our guests. We have some guests, but then we want to start an open discussion with all of you. So there is Florencia Andreola. You studied architecture, is this right? Yeah, you studied architecture. She has a PhD in art history at the University in Bologna. Now she's an independent researcher. Together focuses on theory and practice at the same time, and on the intersections between architecture, city, and gender. And then there is Azzurra Muzzonigro. Azzurra, right next to her. Azzurra is an architect, a curator, and an urban researcher. She teaches urban and social design at the NABA and the Domus Academy. She has a master also at the Bartlett School in London and a PhD in urban studies. And they both, in 2022, they founded the firm or the research firm office called Sex and the City. For instance, they published the famous Milan Gender Atlas. And then next to Michael, there's Julia Girardi-Hoog. She has a PhD in sociology of architecture, and since 2013 she works for the City Council of Vienna, and I found it very nice in the description that you are called, since 2023, you are the gender planner of Vienna. Very nice. She is responsible for gender planning in public space and in social housing. I am Sabine Pollard. I am an architect with an office in Vienna. We plan mainly subsidized housing and co-housing projects. And I started my career, or we started our career in that with the Woman Housing Project. I will talk about that a bit later. And next to me there is, that's Elena. You have to introduce yourself. But I wrote it down. There is it. I had it.
Elena, my name is Elena.
I know that your name is Elena. Please, Elena, introduce yourself. Sorry.
My name is Elena, and I take part in a project, in a social project in Milan called Space of Mutual Aid, Spazio di Mutuo Soccorso, which is an occupied place, a liberated place, like several that we have seen talking about Rome. Of course, Milan is totally another town with respect to Rome, but we share something similar to them with all the experiments of living from the grassroots with also feminism and care land. So.
Are you also an anthropologist?
Yeah, of course. Personally, I'm also a social anthropologist, and I'm working both in the University of Milan and in the University of Gastronomic Science in Pollenzo, which is in Piedmont. But yeah, I'm a social researcher more in general. As activist, I'm also involved in other kind of social research. For example, trying to construct oral archives or drawing archives from grassroots experience, migrants, communities, and so on. Thank you.
And Michael, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, very, very curious today. A little bit, yeah, I'm very, very curious about this event today. So my name is Michael Obrecht. I'm one of the curators here. I'm also partner at Felcher with two architects and the head of the department of housing and design at the TU Wien. And yeah, let's see what the evening will bring.
Okay, thank you. So we asked our guests to give a short statement at the beginning, and I would like to ask you, Julia, to start, or Julia.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for this great pavilion for the two of you. It's great content, and I would like to get a little deeper on the social housing in Vienna. And so this is the Anna Boschek-Hof. This is one of the communal housings that we've seen, and this is already one aspect of gender planning that I do, that I look after. It's also looking after a fair representation of women in the naming of streets and places and also housing. So this is the Anna Boschek-Hof. It's a really typical house that we have. It's an 80s kind of structure in the 10th district. I'm not sure if you have painted it in, but I guess not. But then what we do, what is very important to me is to look what is actually happening inside those houses, because we have 220 apartments like these, and of course they are regulated. We cannot enter the apartments. The tenants' rent protection is very hard. So we do science projects and ask people, how do you feel in your apartments? What is missing? What sort of work is happening? So we did a study looking at labor at home, and first we assumed, well, there is no labor happening in social housing, because our estimation was mobile work is something that managers do, like you do video conferences. And we thought, okay, this is not happening in social housing, not in especially housing where people live that earn very little, that have very little, at least Austrian accredited education. But we realized a lot of work is actually happening if you define work differently. If work is not something that is actually paid, but is actually acknowledged as something that needs to be done to keep children, to foster up children, to keep the neighborhoods safe. So we did interviews and asked people to describe their homes and the limitation of their homes. So we did biographic interviews and then made the drawings, translated these drawings. And I brought two of the stories that were actually quite touching for us. So there was this single mom with twins and another child. She lives in one bed with her two children in this little apartment. And we talked about the summers and the heat, and it gets up to 40 degrees in this apartment, because these apartments from the 80s, they have no external shading. This is because when at the time they were planned, we were thinking that heating is the most important thing. The winters are bad, people die in the winter, and we of course did not assume that climate change would happen so fast. So what is actually happening now is that a lot of the apartments are turning into boiling hells, and this was even more touching. This is the floor plan of a single mother. She lives in a room, in a bed with her two children, so she can afford two desks where the children can actually do their homework. So in one room, they sleep in one bed and even study the whole day. So because she knows school education is so important, and she has to sacrifice her own bed even to help her children to grow up. And she's ashamed of that. And this is also something I think gender planning should look at, to look with empathy at the realities of life. And these are no exceptions. This is just an average household in the communal housing of women doing care work under incredible conditions. She's really thankful she has an unlimited contract for her apartment, that she's able to afford it. But the housing conditions and the heat in summer really makes it very hard for her. So this is something that we as a city have to look at when I think of what is gender planning really. It is looking at actual life realities honestly and find solutions based on the daily needs of the actual tenant, and not be very normative about how things should be and how it's her own fault why she doesn't have a better job or something. It's about looking with empathy at the realities. And this is also a reality. This is mortality rates of the over 65-year-olds in Vienna. I'm not sure if you can see it a lot, but basically it's like the dying happens usually in December and January, when the flu comes, when it's very cold, when people are indoors. And the yellow spikes is the mortality in summer. So we have overmortality of 50 to 70,000 people all over Europe in the summers, and 2/3 of these overmortalities are women. And I think this is completely undermentioned, and this is because of the heat inequality. If I have more resources, if I have a lot of money, I have an air conditioner, I have a house and maybe a pool, I have a car with an air conditioner. If I have very little money, I'm at the bus stop at lunchtime waiting for a bus. I need to stand there. There is no shelter, no sun shelter, and it gets up to 50 degrees there. If you have a little baby in a pram, the baby is cooked if you stand there for 10 minutes. Elderly people are collapsing there. So this is Vienna at the year 2025, and it will get much worse. So I think gender planning means to look at different target groups, to look at their everyday lives, to look in very fine detail, what do they need and when, not at the least, but really at everyday lives of average income and below average income people. So this is my last one, and this is maybe also a connection to your the discussion about collective housing. This is what I looked at because of these elderly people and the women dying in the heat. This is the household size of the over 65-year-old. And I only want you to see that the red part on the right side is larger than on the left side. This is men over 65, and you see that they live, and the red dots are the single households. So men are much more likely to live in a single household. They're much more likely to live in a two-person household than women. Women live longer because often have older husbands, and men generally die younger. So it ends. We see that loneliness in age is mainly a female thing. Single households are much higher under women, and then also they live less in a two-person household. This has many reasons, but I think this is the kind of data analysis we need to do from a gender planning perspective, to do some honest analysis and to see what's there and not what should be there, in order to develop solutions interdisciplinarily that really meets the urgent needs of people in the different life phases that also change through time. So one outcome was from the research project with the Anna Bosche co-force, we need relief rooms, Entlastungsräume in German, but I think the translation is relief rooms. We need rooms in the house that are for common use, where kids can do their homework so they don't have to sit in the bedroom, where people can work when they study for the German exams, for example. Even unemployed people do work. They need to study for courses, etc. So we need those relief rooms, indoors and outdoors, that are cooled, that are actually important for the household and in future even for survival. We do actual cooling zones in Vienna, where we have that you cool down to 22 degrees, where you can sit and lie down without spending money, and they're used all the time, even until like late at night, where people can cool down and somehow recover again, because the heat waves are so long, even in Vienna, that people find it hard to recover, and that's where the mortality comes. So these are just some aspects of what I think is gender planning and what I think is necessary to do, because women generally have less resources because of the care work that is mostly unpaid or very badly paid, and that's the dimension of gender aspects that I look at most.
Thank you very much. Azzurra, may I ask you?
We come there?
No, you can also stay there.
Yeah.
However you
Yeah.
okay.
Hello everyone. Okay, I start, but we are together. As Sabine told you, we work together in the context of our non-profit association, which is Sex and the City, and we deal with gender-sensitive urban planning, meaning we try to understand how gender studies some way overlap on spatial studies. So we deal a lot about public space or the city in general, but at the same time, it's obvious that we need to look at the houses, how people live in their daily lives, and this took us, let's say, talking about and reasoning about how
our daily lives are organized in our houses. Something I'd like to start with is that family is not, I'm going to read a bit because I have many data, sorry for the phone, but we are in 2025. So family today don't conform anymore to an ideal model. They became smaller, more fragmented, and increasingly unable to serve as a reliable support network in daily lives. In Italy, this shift is striking. As of 2021, 1/3 of all households, the 33%, consist of just one person. Okay, that's nearly the triple the percentage recorded in 1971. And over the same period, large families, those with 5 or more members, so 3 children, let's say, have all but disappeared, dropping from 21.5% in 1971 to just over 5% today. So this evolution marks a profound transformation in how we live, of course. No? The traditional family structure, once seen as stable and universal, is quietly dissolving. And yet, housing policies, real estate markets, and welfare systems continue to treat this outdated model as the norm. We still build houses for nuclear families, design welfare schemes around the assumption of intergenerational support, and define need through a lens that no longer reflects reality. At the same time, of course, homes no longer fulfill a purely residential function, and so increasingly they are spaces where productive and reproductive labor overlap. No? So in the house, in the home, we work, we care, we educate, we cook, and also we recover, all under the same roof. This blurring of boundaries has intensified in recent years due a lot to COVID-19 pandemics, and after that, when many people found themselves confined, in very small apartments and who had to serve simultaneously as offices, as schools, as care facilities, and we understood that we had a problem we had to deal with. But these transformations haven't affected everyone equally. In Italy, think about that, the 42% of women between 30 and 69 years old don't work on the labor market. They are all dedicated to the needs of the family, so they take care of children or elderly parents. And even among women who are employed, nearly 30% work part-time because of the necessity to have time to take care of family, because welfare doesn't respond to this kind of need. So this gender division of labor is deeply entrenched. A 2018 European Union report found that 42% of Europeans still believe that a woman's primary duty is to take care of the home and family. And yet, despite this new reality we are talking about, our built environments have remained largely unchanged. Families, whatever their shape or size, are confined in increasingly smaller apartments, often disconnected from neighbors and from shared resources. Children have fewer and fewer spaces where to play, and the enormous amount of time and energy spent on care work remains largely invisible and socially devalued.
Yeah, so basically what we are facing is at the same time, let's say, a social and a spatial issue, no? Because families, as Florencia was saying, are dissolving. We have so many like individual nucleus families, no? So on one side, we need to rethink radically what a family is, no? So think of a family, let's say, beyond blood ties, no? And conceive a completely different and very much radical, let's say, idea of let's say, constellations of affections that can share perhaps the same space, no? Because this affects also the spatial side of it, because we have houses that no longer, let's say, can support the kind of families that we have now. So we have outdated spaces that need to be reimagined completely, no? So let's say we look at experiments, let's say all over Europe, but also, let's say, starting from the material feminists, no? So the first revendication, how do you say, struggles of the feminist movements, trying to rethink, on one side, let's say, care not as a feminine duty, but as a collective or somehow shared duty. So the let's say the challenge of rethinking housing from a feminist perspective is, first of all, putting care at the center, and let's say the idea of sharing care among all the inhabitants of the house, which don't have to be, closely a family in the sense of a blood ties. All right. So on one side is this. So we look at all the experiments, for example, of collective kitchens or communal spaces, mutual aid, and also very much look forward to what Elena will say, because for us the experience that Elena and Spazio di Mutuo Soccorso are bringing today is one of the things that we're really looking at as, really rethinking collectivity, as let's say a new form of community that is no longer, let's say, made of genetical ties, okay, but is, let's say, people that on one side choose to live together but are unified also by the struggle, to a certain extent. So all of this is very inspiring for us, and I think the message that we would like you to take with you is, on one side we have these cards, in which we are asking, what is family for you? So if you want to answer for your own, I think it's a good collective brainstorming, let's say. So, what we would like to take on with you is to kind of expand the boundaries of what family is and what a house can, let's say, host. No?
Thank you.
Thank
I find
you.
it very interesting that you ask what a family could be in future, because normally we ask what could it be instead of a family, like a tribe or a gang or I don't know what, but it might be more interesting to think of a transformation of a family, maybe, and more realistic. Yeah, because we probably cannot give it up totally. This is like in communism, it failed totally to split families and to remove children from families and to do that totally different. But Elena, maybe you talk about your experiences. I don't know what you want to talk now. But
yeah. So thank you for the invitation, because for us it's always really precious to be able to tell us a little bit, to tell our experience, to share, because of course contamination and sharing are two really, really important things to still transforming. First of all, SMS, Space of Mutual Aid, is this. This is the planimetry of the Spazio di Mutuo Soccorso, which are practically three big buildings, which remain empty for more or less 20 years before being occupied or liberated, as you want and you prefer, by a group of peoples which came from previous struggles, which are mainly struggles for housing and city rights, because really close to Space of Mutual Aid there is San Siro neighborhood. San Siro neighborhood is one of the biggest popular public housing neighborhood I think in the one of the north of Italy and of course of Milan. It's a really poor neighborhood with a lot of people, and in general in Milan there is a great housing problem because, to resume, there are too many people without house and too many empty houses without people. So the situation obviously find a spontaneous resolution because people occupy the empty houses, obviously, because the alternative is living in the street, basically. So a lot of years ago, more or less 20 years ago, started this struggle through a committee for housing rights called Abitanti di San Siro, Inhabitants of San Siro neighborhood, which basically was born spontaneously after a big season of eviction, of mass evictions. So people start react and join together, and they created this committee. After several years, resisting eviction was not enough. People start to organize it, for example, to create better dignity living condition in the popular neighborhood, and then to, for example, through the swap markets, second-hand markets, or Italian school for migrants, for example, or self-organized kindergarten, and so on. When all this kind of project became always larger and larger, space, the material dimension of space became fundamental. Really close to this network, there were these three enormous buildings, totally empty, and so people decide to enter and to start to create not only practical niche resolutions, but an idea of a community. A feminist activist which came from Bolivia, which is called Maria Galindo, declare we have not only to organize and to join ourselves starting from the needs that we can share, because obviously we are really different people in diaspora towns through the lens of gender, through the lens of abilities, through the lens of economics and so on. But so we have not to join because we share the same vulnerability or the same needs, but because we share the same rebeldia in Spanish, which means the rebel attitude to resolve, to face oppressions, and to join together to resolve different kind of oppression through the same practices. And so this is more or less what we try to create, because a space of mutual aid is, as the name suggests, the idea to create a networks, community networks, in which everyone can participate if accept the idea of sharing times, capacity, abilities, everything, basically, something with the other. And we are also here I want to share with you the manual of mutual aid practices, which is a very ancient manual, because we occupied SMS in 2013. This book, this publication is a self-publication of 2012. So all the practices that we try to practice and then to put into the space. But we are also part of Non Una Di Meno, maybe the Italian people know, the trans feminist network, Ni Una Menos, not one less, which is a global trans feminist network. And for us, the trans feminism is one of the most important lenses to build a community in general, and focusing a little bit more on the main topic of the presentation. I want to stress that in the space of mutual aid, we try to fight against gender oppression in several ways. For example, working deeply and putting literally our hands into all the different dimensions of reality of popular neighborhood, and not only popular neighborhood, but also the schools of the neighborhood, for example, and more in general of peoples and housing topics, because we know that in Italy, but in general in the world, the 80% of gender violence happens inside the domestic space. So the struggle for housing rights have also to be a strike against violence against gender-based violence. So it's really important to us. So, for example, in 13 years that the space of mutual aid exists, obviously we faced some kind of violence dimension, never into terrible, luckily, but yes. For example, women that disappear from the social arena of the space of mutual aid, and it's totally against the principle of the mutual aid space. Or, for example, Mother Lord. Yes, thank you. So single mothers, which have too much to work to participate in the social activities, for example, and so on. And so we always try to resolve, starting from the assembly, starting to put in common, first of all, the request to participate. You have to find a way of participate. Please, we can sit down and try to understand with you why you are not able to participate. For example, because several kind of cultural dimension are limits to your participation in the public sphere. How we can manage this? Or, for example, maybe we can try to cook together in order to free sometimes to share or to feed your children. But feeding children together, we can stay together doing the same things, for example, just to mention some examples. And the other point that I want to stress, and then maybe we can focus more if we want to have a chat, a discussion, is that we through the Non Una di Meno network, we collaborate with Centri Antiviolenza against violence center. For example, you mentioned one before, Lucha y Siesta, one occupied against violence center in Rome. We have others in Milan. And so this kind of center recognized that space of mutual aid is a radar on the territory, because before there were the slogan, no one save alone. No one goes to the against the violence center alone. Mm-hmm. No one single woman. Okay. In my experience, which is a little bit longer under this field, women and in general people need to find someone which helps to reach, for example, an anti-violence center, or in general a path to overcome and to go behind a violent situation. The space of mutual aid is there. It's really more easy to find because, for example, women with housing problem are considered female issues. This is the point. Even in riot resistance against eviction, women in the popular neighborhood play a great role. Because also in the riot situation, house is a family issue. So they are able to participate in this kind of struggle in a really different way and active way. So they find the space of mutual aid because, for example, second-hand clothes, food, or house are family issues. And so when they find this space, maybe they can start structuring relationship, which are the first criteria to reach a second level help, for example, to overcome a violent situation in which they live in their proper houses, for example. So I think that this kind of experiences, a space of mutual aid, but a lot of others that, for example, are in Rome, but also in other towns in Italy and the world, are really, really relevant to ask how we can build communitarian situation, and I want only to add that the decolonial lens is really relevant, because in these kind of experiences there are a lot of several people from all over the world, from all the diasporic communities that lives our towns nowadays, and there are several forms of care and of creating community. For example, we in Space of Mutual Aid, there are a lot of South American people in a lot of area of South American in the original languages. There are no words to mention me or I or the self, but only to mention we. And so what is self-determination, which is one of the main capital of feminism, if we don't have the word I, if we start from the word we? So all these kind of questions, in my opinion, are really relevant to also to transform feminism and to transform gender issues, talking about common space, when our common is not only white common, but is diasporic common. Thank you.
May I just ask you something? You were talking of 3 huge buildings. How huge are they, and were they in former times housing projects or other typologies?
Yes, sorry. There are different kind of projects. There is the inhabitant projects, which means that in SMS live more or less 80 people. And then there are other social projects, which are, for example, the popular gym, with box, capoeira, like yoga, and other kind of sports. There is the Italian School for Migrants, and what we call popular university, which means sharing knowledges, every kind of knowledges, music, arts, and so on. There is the kindergarten. There is the farmer markets, 0 kilometers, and free GMO and chemicals markets, and a lot of other projects. So the idea is not to create a ghetto for people in needs, but to recognize that we all have some kind of vulnerability and needs, including don't being alone, because in Milan it's really easy, also if you have the economical possibility to live theoretically with dignity, to remain totally alone in your private house with your 24 hours job, you know? And so trying to mix different kind of needs, including the one of find the people around you. And so there are several kind of projects that all based on sharing. The idea is creating a sharing system without money. So nobody pay for anything. I want to clarify.
And I mean, she was asking the typology. It was how.
Okay, that's good.
I don't know.
Before. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. No, sorry. Before before they were all houses, apart from one department in the first floor that was like a wellness center, something like that.
Okay.
We found ancient Greek horrible columns.
Okay, thank you.
One question for that, what you said at the end. So you made this sharing economy really based on sharing.
Yeah.
So where does it stop? No? If you look back at the revolution of feminism, which returns to the Marxist origin of left-wing economy, no? And where something had a value and something was out of that circle of evaluation, no? Which was care work. So for me, it would be interesting. What is the boundary? Where so there is a moment where money starts and where your sharing starts. That would be interesting. Where for what you don't have to pay and for what do you pay? And isn't that the most political question, where the money starts in this discussion, and what you evaluate as?
Yes. It's very difficult. First of all, I want to assume that we are like pure community or a pure project, because of course no, we live in the middle of the town of Milan and in a really gentrified neighborhood, so purity is something that we can't permit, of course. But nobody pay for anything that you can do in SMS, but we organize we organize different kind of activities, for example, social dinner, free offer, social dinner, or something like this to collect collectively money to, for example, self-recover of the buildings itself, for example, or to electricity, for example, again, and something like this. So we try to create a collective moment to collect money, but always under a principle of the free offer. Of course, for example, the farmer market, you need to pay the piece of cheese to the farmer. It's quite obviously, but we ask to them to sign a mutual aid contract, which is obviously not a real contract, is a symbolic contract in order to maintain the prices really, really low, because the idea is that everyone could eat healthy and not a privilege, for example. So everything is managed step by step, but the idea is that is a sharing system without money more than possible.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a short statement by me also. I was educated in university by men. I was working in offices which were owned by men, and I was surrounded by men. I founded a practice with my men, and then I went as a guest professor to USA and was very impressed in the 1990s how they already worked theoretically about gender topics like Beatrice Colomino, so that I was really impressed by that work. So I came back with this idea to establish first a theory about that, and I wrote my PhD and my habilitation about the topic of, and I explored or I made a research about how these two things were always connected, femininity on the one side and housing on the other side. So it was always the case until I think the 1960s at least, that women were responsible for the house or the apartment. In former times they had to stay in the house, they had to stay at home. And on the other side there were always the men, the decision makers, and the men who are building the homes, and the men who were doing the urban plans and deciding where it should be what distributed, which architecture, which kind of settlement. So after writing about that, I decided to make a real project out of it, and I started this woman housing project. I started to collect interested women and the idea was to just to develop a project only with women, and a woman can decide everything until a certain point at least, and then it should be an open project where also men would be allowed to go in. And now it's since 15 years I think now lived and finished, and people live there. And for me it's a good example of how to solve some of these questions, like what you were talking about, that so many people live alone in Italy. It's the same in Austria. We have this number is absolutely increasing. More and more people live alone. And already at that point, 15 years ago, it was the case that mainly women live alone, and mainly women who are elder than 60 years live alone, or a lot of them live alone. And they live in apartments which do not suit them, which are too big for them, or somehow are wrong in any case. So we try to make that, and the experience of that is that the synergy in such a house where a lot of women who are feminists and who have this kind of radical approach that you were talking about, it makes a big difference. So the things that they share, the synergy they have, that they create, that they help, the everyday help, this kind of unpaid care work works quite well. It does not work at all if not feminists are living in these buildings, and that's the case because there are new people coming and they are not part of this original group anymore. And this would be one of the big questions for me. How can we bring all these aspects of a small co-housing project where we have a group of feminists, for instance, creating their own bubble. How can we bring these aspects into a normal, bigger housing project? And how can we bring all these gender aspects into mass housing in a way? So this is the experience of that. I would ask you, Michael, to talk maybe about the cluster living, because for me this is an example of a new typology for a new type of family, maybe. If you can just talk about what the idea behind this.
Right. I think that, so first of all, already very interesting discussion. And yeah, we are, as architects, we are operating obviously a system of potential floor plans and of potential social possibilities. And we were very lucky for our practice, which came a lot also from activism. It was quite a magical moment when Vienna, through certain people which went into institutions and to people which were literally within that milieu of public-private partnership, which is mostly also non-profit orientated, which creates a mass of people which are a certain way of self-regulating them socially, because if everybody shares the same values, you are also there's a normalization of certain values, which I found interesting. And we were very lucky at that time that a new cooperative idea came in for a cooperative slogan, which was also founded by people which were also making a Sackbrick, Oberkorab, and they had a vision to make in this kind of new neighborhood development. I think it's also fundamental, it's within a system. So it was a new development of an area in Vienna with a huge amount of housing, and where quite an interesting moment took place in the development of the phase 1 and the phase 2. I think that's also important. Phase 1 was still the peripheral answer to the city. That means a huge economy suitable projects of 160 apartments for a developer, yes, with social attitude, forming a block, and then creating all the necessity for new housing. And then in a newer development, the notion we have to make a city. That means how can we create heterogeneity, new kind of models within the city. That first rule is make the plots smaller. And the plots smaller not just for aesthetical reason, but also that the entrepreneurs which can provide an offer to that plot can be smaller entities. And that was also a chance for new developers to be part of that game. And that means that this kind of cooperative put two plots together and had a vision for two plots to make an answer beyond that what is already established, this kind of co-housing project, which is more driven by personal and community-driven aspects, and to offer a model which could be an offer to the market. And that offer is not yet here in Vienna housing, which is cluster living. And so the tentative was really to create a new household model. So beyond the ideology, what is in is their family, not family, it's mostly about space. So that's what we made was with a trick, which was a lot of calculation to make it possible, a lot of cluster building, which are 4.5 meter high, where the normal floor plan is still under the regulation of that what the minimum apartment is. The second level is so small that it's not counted because they are so small square meters, but they are there. So it's a small entity which is made of a bath, a micro kitchen, and a living room, and a 4.5 meter precious space, which forming together a big apartment with a community kitchen and a community space, everything 4.5 meter high, which became interesting because it became a model against the desire of all the Viennese to live in Gründerzeit floor plans, which with this, at that time, wrong idea about hygiene, opened the way to make floor plans at that time, also for investors with a 3.70 meter high, which are obviously glorious, but that was an investor saw is the minimum, which is also interesting. No? So, and this kind of cluster living, so it was an offer to the market. What was a little bit of pity that we had the whole house made for cluster living, and then there was a ground floor which was made for Fab Lab and other activities that should all be community driven. But in a certain kind, a market, not a market, a social market idea of that, what you described before, in a milieu which is already left wing open. And there was a moment, unfortunately, where the cooperatives did not get the continuous funding by the banks because they did not believe that these models could work. So we had the construction which was already running, and in the middle of the construction we had to plan differently the house, so a few clusters could remain and a few clusters transformed into a kind of private for a more normal model of cooperatives which was dealing with social housing. And what was very interesting, so they had to take over the cluster, and the cluster homes were the first which were filled with people, because there was really a desire that you take you pay a rent of 500 euros for this more or less 30 square meters, and then you have additional square meters within the city. So very, very cheap as a model. But it was interesting that it became part of Vienna housing model to them. So first it was radical cooperative, which had to sell it to a cooperative which was much more normal in their kind of clients. And I think but the main idea was really that it could be used for 6-7 people, which could go from micro family or just to, most of the people have one kid which is in divorce. So it's really a mixture of people, old and young, and it's an answer to exactly to solitude and to a non-defined idea of commoning. And I think that's interesting because it's just an apartment, so it's not a huge apparatus, but already as an apartment it gives an answer, and obviously statistically, and Julia will know the numbers statistically, how many really would, how big would be the market, but still we cannot define yet the market because it was never a vision, no? So right now it's there, it works, the people which are living there are becoming super protagonists of spreading the voice, because for them it's a perfect model to co-live, because it gives them an incredible amount of possibility to live privateness and community, but without the commitment. So I think that's my opinion. The Viennese model is interesting when it becomes not too much commitment driven. So the threshold is so low, you don't have to go to, it's like a marriage, no? You don't have to make a marriage. It's a kind of, let's have a little bit of sex and then let's see. But I think this model of low threshold and to opening up to new models of possibilities becomes interesting, and that's maybe also when an entity like in Milan becomes so big that you just go there and you can experiment, because the pioneers made already so much work that you could easily access it. That makes it interesting. But the cluster living, I think, is a very, very interesting model of making the idea of household bigger, but without knowing what a household is, without defining it, but just giving space. And I think that's interesting.
Julia, is Vienna thinking beyond families?
We're starting to. It's difficult on a large scale because we operate on such a large scale, and I think the problem is not the new to be built part. That's we together with Wohnfonds, we experiment and we do some of the competitions with new intergenerational living. But my main concern is the existing building stock. These 400,000 apartments that are there. What are we going to do with them? This is where the vulnerable people live. This is where the people live. I'm interested in why it did not work, where not feminists move into your project. This is where I'm working, because this is the average people. This is what we have. This is what is here and what will be here in the next 10, 15 years. What is absolutely not fit for summer, and how we can improve that. What sort of social but also technical possibilities do we have there? Because these houses will be there. I mean, I don't have any illusions that they will somehow disappear. And what are people ready for? Are they ready to go together and then tear down the walls and form these new families and say, okay, we join each other? And I'm not sure they are actually. We tried a lot of experimentations, and then somehow people never came to what we tried to talk to them about. So it's about, they are so under pressure. There's families of single moms, and then when we talk about mobility or climate change, they have no time to come down to the gardens and talk to us about it. So this is what is most at my heart.
And some of the walls cannot even be teared down.
Yeah, exactly.
Some are that's really frozen in concrete.
Yeah, it's in concrete, totally.
It's really crazy.
Yeah, but some rooms are there, and we can find them. As you said, in Andreola, you have to look for these rooms. These are the rooms that are somehow inside the houses, the apartment blocks. They are not the window front rooms in the ground floors, but in the Gemeindebaus they are somewhere hidden. So you have to first find them, and then kind of revitalize them and ask the community to use them and encourage them to use them. So I think that's what I always mean about honesty. It's great to have pioneering projects like you do, and we need to calculate how big is the population that would understand and want such a living model, and what is the average, how big is the population of people that want to live like they used to, like the single mom in their home. She wouldn't want to move out, but she would desperately need cooling, and she would desperately need a common room where the kids can do their homework and maybe, do it with other kids so they can study together or something. So this is different levels we have to look at. But to answer your question, I think in the new experimental buildings, we can question family. Some people are ready to do that in the political and administrative decision. But I think on the main kind of model, like existing model stuff.
But also on the main, I think most of the new buildings work still with family model apartments. So the 75 square meter 3-room apartment is for a family. It's not for a single person. And the 30 square meters for a single person with really, really not much money is very rare. So it's in your project, and we built some of them, but they are not the normality. So I think there's still a lot to do in that case.
Yeah.
But I was interested. Sorry. That's what you said. I think because you went in this question of scaling and climate change, and if you look at these kind of housing models, they are really built on modularity. So they are, you can divide it maybe in 5 families of buildings, and they are literally the same. And with that goes also the whole Gründerzeit, because it's absolutely the same problem as if you could not have a decorative city with jalousie, or like Paris is showing it's also possible. But that brings to another question, really, to this kind of large-scale thing. So Vienna literally could make a factory just for external shade.
Sure.
And it would really make sense. And I think that's also interesting in that sense, how rapidly these models on one side could also be solved quite quickly if there is this kind of wish. In terms of if you have a factory, maybe it makes it 35% cheaper than that as an answer. But in this, that's what I was really attracted to, because you're always so precise with data. And the idea of this kind of loneliness model, so which is exactly, it's really an urgent need. No? How you literally work with that notion. I mean, how can you, first of all, convince somebody that he might move to somewhere else, somebody which has roots in 40 years in a place. How, and how do you make it in an elegant way that you don't feel overtaken by care by somebody else? It's a very subtle thing, and how do you work with this? How do you make a transitional model of non-feeling solitude without having the idea that somebody is taking control of it?
And I think women are the solution, the co-location. The project by Freya Brandl, she is making from housing project for women over 50. And she has like waiting lists forever because women, they end up alone. They're maybe divorced, the kids have moved out. So there's like, okay, let's do it. Let's move in together. This is brilliant. And this is the nicest thing I've done in a long time to visit co-location. And this is 15 small apartments. They have the individual kitchens and they are sorted around the common kitchen. So probably it was too radical, the one kitchen house, to have no individual kitchens. But I think people want autonomy. So this is 15 smaller apartments, and then 2 men also living there. They were dragged along as well. So they said 2 husbands, but they moved in with the 15 women into the 15 apartments, and they together they hardly have any duties. Just one meeting a month where finances are talked about. The rest is all voluntary, and they're between 95 and 50, and they live together so happily, and they do all the excursions. And some women are just not super active, but most of them are. And I think this is the key to the future. This is also what's possible when we build new, but you need those groups of people already to be renting places. It's hard for us to build something like a collective housing. We've done that once and serviced one for folks. If then nobody wanted to move there, then it's really hard. You have this really weird floor plan setting with a lot of bathrooms that then nobody rents. So this is hard for the housing provider, like on such a large scale. But I think women and the ability, the social searching that we do, that usually in society to do the care work in terms of or a lot of the relationship works. This is what we see translated in these housing models, that many of the new housing forms are actually driven by women, and so this is for me also one of the keys for the future to not label it explicitly for women, but we see who is ready to change, who is ready to collaborate, who is happy to collaborate. These are often women, and not only with children also, but also in a higher age. Do you have that sort of experience in Austria?
I mean, we have here in Italy. No, there are not many. There are some experiments, let's say, of hybrid co-living, intergenerational. So you have old people and young people who care each other. Say that young people are going to live in these houses for some years, 4, 5, 6 years, and in those years they give hours of their time, to help the elderly in their duties or just to spend time with them. So it's quite nice. This is big, maybe you know it, Borgo Intergenerazionale Greco in Milan. But yeah, there are some experiments now which are not really affordable in Italy, in Florence and maybe in Turin too, for elderly, but really expensive. So it's, this is Italy, so not a surprise.
Yeah, no, for example, of course, Vienna is like the light in Europe for us that we look at. But also, for example, Barcelona is interesting as a kind of model that we look at because of the cooperative system. We visited some of them. But what is, I think, the difference with the Italian model is the fact that the public sector, so the state, the administration, the ground is actually public where the cooperative are. And that makes a huge difference in terms of accessibility, because you don't have to pay that much to build the housing, and in general the cost is affordable. But then that's make a huge difference. We don't have that kind of attitude, I think, in like almost anywhere. That's why it becomes so important, all the bottom-up initiative and the struggle and so on, because you reproduce a model, or you create a model in which you don't have to pay for living, and so for example, one of the things that I wanted to highlight, one day we went to do a laboratory in SMS. It was very interesting with a lot of inhabitants and so on, and we were trying to investigate their daily lives, so how do you move, where do you work, how much time do you spend in transportation, how do you manage your daily life. And it was really interesting because
people would do like even 2 or 3 jobs in a day. They move a lot, and they were talking about going in with bicycle and all of that. But what is interesting to me is also that while they do all of this, I mean, their kids are there, and somebody else is going to take care of them. And you see them all like running free in the courtyard, and you don't even know whose children is that. But somebody is looking after, no? And that's the value of the community somehow. That you need to earn money, of course, because you need to do the grocery and like take care of your daily life. But a lot of what is in the general model, like on the shoulder of the singular family, is shared through the community, and the community is a huge value in that sense. No, so I think the somehow the challenge is how to scale up this kind of model, really, because there is the base of mutual a reciprocity, a reciprocal aid. So how can we? I think Barcelona is interesting because I don't think we can aim at Vienna model at all. We don't have the possibility, But in that sense, if an administration was clever enough or like enlightened enough to understand that there is an issue, you could scale up a model like that through, for example, a cooperative system and reproducing that kind of relationship with public support. Somehow the public recognizes that there is a value in what is being created there and support it and give the ground to create the soil. And instead they are trying to evict them. Yeah, of course. Just to understand. So we're very far.
Yeah, this discussion already last time. So how could the city see what all these people are doing in Springtime and other projects, all the value that is created there, the learning groups, the fact that children go to school, the integration work, so everything. So there's so much work in it. How can they make that show and make that the city sees this value? But I mean, there's the discussion about the care work and that women are the solution for everything. There's a danger about that, of course, that again, women are taking care of the care work and they are responsible again for the care work. In that case, I prefer the one kitchen model, house model, where all the care work is paid. Or I would prefer it. It would not work probably. I mean, there's Anna Puitgana, I don't know how you spell her. Yeah, she is working on that utopia of the non-kitchen house and even the non-kitchen city, which is really interesting, but not built now. But I was thinking now, because you said, I think that there were 80 families living.
No, 80 people.
80 people, yeah, but 80 people. So I think that's something that children can run around and there are so many people taking care of them. I think it needs a certain size. Like, for instance, the Sargfabrik, there are, I think, 70 people, or no, 140 people, 70 apartments or so, yeah. And Robert Korup always said that it needs a certain size to afford common spaces, but also to offer these different people who are responsible for something or who can take care. So I think the size matters in that case.
I think it's interesting that what happened with heritage. I thought it took a while that we recognize there are certain things which we have to take care and we valorize them as architectural objects. But it would be very interesting if there is a moment when we recognize all these models as something which became literally a model and which we literally have to repeat in the city as a strategy. But that would, I think it will be very important, and therefore I'm saying back to economy, that what Silvio Federici did and that what absolutely also Marx did. So maybe he wrote a lot of bullshit afterward, but the question was that somebody looked at economy as the key, and that would be very, very interesting to look at this model, what they are really doing, economically speaking, so really hard facts. If you would, paradoxically, that's what you're doing as sharing models, if you would evaluate the monetarian thing behind to convince the other system that doesn't mean that you have to become economical, but it just have to, that it has to be recognized that this is not an anti-system, but it's a systemic support. And I think that would be very interesting. But that's what happened also with creative class, no? Or when Saskia Saskan wrote Why City Still Exists, no? Because you have this kind of second layer of culture. Why is management in a city where opera is and culture, and why do we put money in that? So that, and there is an, so it happened also with creative industry, so that it was not recognized. And then when they were looking deeper, it became this kind of moment. And I think that would be really, really interesting, because it's so evident that it works. And it's so, and what would be then the real state strategy? What you have to offer? What is the ground? How can it make cheaper? So that a lot of these entities can be also, they could be completely autonomous entities which could also say no to the state, but still they are island in a market system. And if you're free that island, I think it's important to recognize what these islands are doing and how do we make that recognizable. But this is also tentative. The whole Biennale is also tentative to make these things recognizable.
Yeah. And may I add, not only an island in the market, in my opinion, but also an island in the general culture, because, for example, before you mentioned the idea of you also being ready to live in some way or being not ready, I think that it implies a most general cultural analysis. And so, for example, I'm wondering if in Vienna there is some kind of collaboration between different institutions, different kind of institutions. For example, I can think to educational one, because, for example, in our case, there are a lot of children running in the garden, but even in a space of mutual aid, when these children became more or less adolescents or adults, because it happens, not all of them decided to still join a communitarian way of life. Someone, yes, because someone started to develop their own family in some way inside the space of mutual aid, but other no, for example. And so for us, we always ask to which kind of educational model we can organize from the grassroots, for example, but more in general terms, how we can, at least in Italy, but I think everywhere under the neoliberalism system, to talk in general terms, the idea of individualism and to obtain a success and to measure your success in terms of individualism is really strong under a cultural profile. So education in Italy reinforced these paradigms. So it's obviously that is also a matter of changing cultural values in a main general way, in my opinion. So I want to ask overall to you, but in general, if you know if there are some efforts in this sense.
For the Vienna Gemeindebau, they work with 70 corporations or associations together to provide housing. But given the size of these Viennese models, they only limit their role in housing provision. But we do housing first, for example. So we talk closely to these associations that provide shelter for homeless people. And so there is this transition phase where there is signed contracts that this person gets social work to start off with their own apartment that is inside just any regular communal housing block. And they sign that, for example, that if they're late in paying rent, then the social worker is notified. So he can or she can immediately get in contact and say, okay, what's up? Why are we late in paying the rent? How can we solve this? And then after 1 or 2 years, this fades out. And then this person can live like any other person with an unlimited housing contract. So we have kind of onboarding and we have also connections to youth work. So 17-year-olds can move in and they get an unlimited contract, but with the 2 years of kind of a probation time when there's nothing bad happening in this first 2 years, and he's or she's ready to pay rent and is not having parties until 4 a.m. every night. So there's not many complaints by the neighbors. This person can stay in this apartment forever. But yeah, because Vienna Housing has 500,000 tenants.
Yeah.
They always say like, okay, the only thing we can do is to provide the house, nothing more. And this is why I also say something, it is too big, because we can see that there's so many topics popping up, and we would need to provide more different kinds of housing, also for patchwork families. But there would be a lot of moving in and out and whatever. And we like Wiener Wohnen, they cannot provide anything but put out the contract. This is your unlimited housing contract, and hopefully you are happily ever after, and you don't bother us anymore, and you can live in your apartment 6 people, we don't care. Just as long as you keep the noise down, you can be a millionaire, you can get 15 children, you can do whatever you want, you can live with 5 women or 10 men, as long as you contain it to your apartment, your floor size. We don't ask, So we're limited in the kind of ground floors that we offer, but we are unlimited as long as you keep to certain rules. You can stay there forever, and it was a funny thing when I was at Biennale, we had no idea who was living in the apartments, no idea, because on the first one hand we cannot enter the apartments anyway because of the legal restrictions, and also because the scheme is like that. We know one person holds an unlimited contract, and we have no idea if this person is even in the country. It's like, but it's okay as long as the rent comes in. And there's no complaints from the neighbors, we're fine, This is
But the model is interesting what you're talking about, because we are having something which is just gray afterwards, no? When the gray zone is just afterwards. So you're very regulated at the beginning, and then gray afterwards. So it's a mixture between a very Nordic super regulation and a very South European non-regulation. And I think therefore it would be interesting, as it is successful, maybe that's the model. So that you have something which is hyper-regulated at the beginning and closes all the eyes afterwards. And I think it would be interesting if something like that could help us also in thinking of between over-regulation and security.
In the system that you're talking about, is there ever an issue of people subletting their apartments for higher prices?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. We are very angry if you rent it out to Airbnb. So we actually employed 5 detectives because the rental rights are so strong. If there's just rumors that you're renting out your apartment on Airbnb, even if there is a screenshot of that, I would still in court have to prove, have to have evidence, because your right to housing is stronger than the Viennese right to not having you subletted. So that's why we hired 5 detectives that would actually rent your Airbnb apartment. And at the moment you sign the contract, you open the door, you take the money from Airbnb. At that moment you lose the apartment, or that this process is even started. So because of this rental rights protection, the tenants' rights are super strong. That's why we need it, and we really hate it, and we absolutely forbid it. And there's different models, also like a digital analysis of the addresses, that we check the housing platforms for the addresses that we're feed into the system, so they know exactly on which street, housing number, this is social housing. You cannot do that. And we also collect the evidence by home employed detectives. So this is absolutely forbidden.
Wow.
I was thinking already last time, Vienna is very good in housing, but not really so good in education, I think. So the schools have a lot of problems, and there are so many children of different nations and cultures, and teachers cannot deal with it anymore in most of the time. So when I heard what Springtime is doing, how they have these 27 nations and children from these 27 nations, how they manage the homework of these children and all this work that they do. So I thought that's exactly probably that kind of help is needed. Probably also in Italy, in Italian schools, I don't know how they work with the different languages and of the children. But in Austria, it would be definitely something that is needed, maybe outside of schools, like in such projects or in housing projects. I mean, housing projects cannot solve the world, or they cannot save the world. They cannot do everything, but it's a lot of this work is done in co-housing projects or in feminist housing projects. So it's again about the value. Is it something that is recognized? Is it something that is maybe paid for? And is this something that is recognized, for instance, in Milano? this kind of work that you do? No.
Unofficially. No, because for example, we have the paradox. We live the paradox. For example, sometimes arrives someone asking for an house, for example, or for the Italian school for migrants, or for the kindergarten. And when we overrule for housing, we ask them, sorry, it's not so easy. Better going to the municipality. They send me here.
The municipality
They suggest me to go there because it's obviously that the public institution has no means, because they don't want to have the means to take care of all the housing emergency in Milan. So they use this kind of realities to solve some problem informally, but informally.
Yeah, the same thing happened during the pandemics.
The same things, and so for us it's a problem because we don't want to be used or subsidiary in a relationship of subsidiarity with the welfare state, because the welfare state have to do the work. They are paid. That they are paid for. We are not paid. So please, is other things. But yes, it's happened a lot. Or
It's like incredible because during the pandemics there was, of course, a huge need of supplies, helping elderly, doing the groceries and whatever. And they sent people to remake, which was an occupied space in Milan. That already was, how do you say, che li volevano sgomberare?
Yeah, it was under eviction at the time, and now and then
And now it
been
doesn't
evicted.
exist anymore.
No.
You know, no, it's quite impressive. Something.
Sinvergüenza.
Sinvergüenza.
Without
No shame,
shameless,
you know.
totally shameless.
Oh, yeah, really impressive.
So yeah.
But yeah, no.
No, I think that they are very, very good and very well in trying to use everything that is for free for them. Of course, without public exposition, because public exposition for institution means also recognizement, but it's quite impossible. But you have to know that the mayor of Milan nowadays, it was the
CEO.
The CEO of Expo.
No.
So
I also had another question pertaining to Austrian social housing. I remember there was, which I feel like might or might not, again, because I don't know the system, be a difference to these kinds of like squatting projects in Italy. In Italy, a lot of these squatting projects are really championed by people that are diasporic, that are migrants, so they're kind of like facing the housing crisis more than others. And I noticed that on one of the panels in the Vienna Pavilion, it said that there was a 2-year, like to access it, you had to live in Vienna already for 2 years. So in my head, this feels like an initial blockage because you can't live there professionally because you don't have affordable housing. So how do you access affordable housing?
Good question. Yeah. We have a lot of aid associations like the Caritas or other NGOs that take care of refugees and asylum seekers as they come. And as you said, we had a lady, Ute Bock, she now sadly passed away, and she had squatted somehow or got some buildings that were before they were turned down to have host refugees there. She got money on a daily basis for the refugees, but she's still accounted as an NGO, like a non-governmental organization. And then policemen will bring her, refugee families that they were picked up at the border at 4 a.m. So the same thing was happening. Like there's services are brought by non-governmental organizations that are raising funds on their own, and then the actual police, the state police, uses the systems also to relieve their own conscience, because what would they do with the family of 4 that were freezing at 4 a.m, put them to jail or something? So they would use it. So this is like in Vienna, it works more because of the associations that are then also cooperating again with Vienna Housing, and then they get some of these refugees or asylum seekers get their own apartments, or they find their place in the private housing market that exists still, and then they stay there if they can afford it. And yeah, because the squatting, I mean, you tell me, but I think squatting doesn't work in Vienna, because we had one squatting project in the tent, and then the city gave it to the squatters for €1. We don't want unsettling, circumstances like that. And they were, the squatters were like, we don't want the house, we just want to squat it, for the sake of squatting it. And then they got it. It's like, you give us €1 and it's yours.
Yeah, because there's no real need. I mean, there's one house in the 15th district, I think, or 14th still, but then there's a lack of need.
Yeah, and then Vienna doesn't want it. They rather give the house, they rather give the house.
No conflict.
In order to have no conflict and a clean solution. And it's kind of, it's like a gluey kind of hug. They give you, it's like, squatting. You shut up when you get the house for €1. We even pay some of the renovation, but please be quiet. No one will. This is like Vienna doesn't tolerate any sort of unsettled circumstances.
But where do we see, I mean, Vienna is quite good in reflecting its mistakes. And I would love to find out in the sports, how do you reflect on something which doesn't work in the, so how can I say, right? Would you say that everything works fine in a model like that? Could it be repeating, or where do we see the social, where do we see some unspoken truths that something does not work, or maybe it's the size, or how do?
Then I would do the same question to Vienna.
I think again there's a lot of things. Yeah.
Of course, there are a lot of things that never works. No, I don't know. For example, in my opinion, the most important point is how to manage when someone broke the mutual pact of mutual aid. So, when someone broke out the pact of mutual aid, we have a pact. It means that we wrote a pact at the beginning, and that we once a year, more or less, try to renew this pact, which is totally informal under the law condition, but is something really relevant and constitutive of the common life.
For example, like participating to the assemblies.
For example, participating in an assembly, or helping in rebuildings and recovering activities to the buildings, or also struggling together, because it's not an existentialist place; it's a struggle place. So you have to share. You have to share the idea that it's not your happiness oasis, but it is a place that help you, because today you are in this condition, but if you have to maintain it open as a possibility, as a tools for theoretically everyone else that in the future will need a house or something else. So the idea of struggle for us is really relevant. And so, for example, what happened when family or when a person but basically refuse to participate in this kind of common rules, how to manage, how to deal it. It's really difficult, and it's not always obviously, or it's not so easy also to understand how someone starts to live inside, because I think that we are an open and permanent community. So how to manage who take part in SMS and who no, or overall under a living point of view, because participating in activities and in social projects is quite easy. But how to live, because we are not the municipality, so it's impossible to solve all the inhabitants' problems. It's not our duty, first of all, but we have the open day every Thursday. It means that every Thursday arrive, I don't know, 10 people desperate, asking for a bed, for a room, for a space, house, for everything.
Every Thursday you have to.
Yeah. And the other
once
day
a
it's
month.
open for the single project, but the main open day is on Thursday. For example, it's problem how manage with the dimension of the problem, and you know that it's not your duty. You're in general terms, of course, but every time it's really difficult. It's really problem, and so which kind of criteria, so which kind of under which kind of conditions. Of we know that most important point is the relationship that people are able to create, and a person that try to become a part is able to create with the others, because first of all it's the relationships in the mutual aid circuit.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult, and of course there are a lot of problems. Or I don't know. I think that they are the main problematics. More or less this. Or interrelational problems, because it's obviously that cohabitation, co-living create problems overall when maybe there are different adults with a lot of different problems, or also a cultural diversity and different kind of cultural background. So every time
System, how to deal with that? Or you develop the system?
assembly, medical talking in the assembly.
Uh-huh. And
Talking.
everybody takes part at the assembly?
They have to.
Hopefully.
They should. Hopefully. Hopefully.
But it is part of, how can I say, in Germany there's a word Durchlaufer. Now in terms of, is it a model which is fun, like a big city, no? Sometimes big cities are there that you pass your use there, and some stay in the city, but for most it's more important that they pass their fundamental years there, and it's becoming like a formative machine, or an organism better. So how many people stay really as a lifelong commitment, and for how many it's a very important part of their biography, and it becomes a substantial part of being a citizen, no? So that it should even have more of that. So it's like, you know what I mean? So that it becomes also a contribution to an education of emancipation. And it's not just a model where all have to live there for all their life, but maybe just a few are remaining there, or it becomes more a model where a lot of people are literally living there. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think that it's valid for both space of mutual aid and another social center, because the space of mutual aid came from this experience of the Housing and City Rights Committee, but also from another social center which is called Cantiere, which now has 24 years old, and it is a high school student organization overall. So I think that it's totally true that this kind of experiences, one of their most important strong point is to create anticorps. Anticorps? Yeah. For example, to racism, to mutual racism in general, to ethnical problems more in general too. And for example, in my opinion, space of mutual aid is something that's really relevant in this sense. There is not a rule that you can stay here 1 year and then change. All the people in SMS which has the legal possibility to ask for a public house had to do it. Okay, because for us struggling for the house is the right, and so theoretically everyone has to strike for his rights, and the municipality had to provide the rights. So everyone with the legal possibility to ask for a public house had to apply. Maybe means 10 years waiting, of course. Sometimes some families of SMS were able to move to public houses. So this is an important point for us because there is like a legal support for them to follow all these issues. Other people simply arrive in SMS with really economic difficulties and also thanks not to pay for renting a house. Maybe they are able in 3, 4, 5 years to resolve their economical problems, and they decide to move away because, for example, they need a proper residence. Residenza. Come si traduce?
Address. No, I mean,
A proper and legal address, for example, asking for a family reunion, for example.
This is not a proper address. No.
In Italy in 2016, I think, there was a law called housing plan, under c'era il governo? No, Renzi e Lupi. Under Renzi government. It was supposed to be a quite left side government, but yes. So there was this plan that states that you can't have your proper address in an occupied place, but this proper address means the right, imply also the right to have water, electricity, gas, primary healthcare assistance, and kindergarten for children. So this is a big problem. So maybe someone needs this kind of rights. For example, of course, from the grassroots there are other organizations, other associations, and the mutual aid network is not only in the building. So we always can manage, and we deal with this kind of things. But maybe someone reached the economical stability to live, to rent something, and decided for different reasons to move. Others decide to stay because the communitarian life is something that is rich, that make their life richer. For example, for sharing care, and so I think totally depend. In my opinion, one of the most nice things is when someone who is able and decide to move because we're able to improve their economic condition, come back to help. Not always, but when it's happened, it's nice. So, for example, there is a family which obtain a public house after a strong struggle with them, and they are all there cooking, helping with all the kind of activities, and so it's really nice because other disappears, and it's a failure, of course, it's a political failure, totally political failure. Of course, life is difficult, but it's a political failure. So.
I want to come back to the gender planning aspect briefly in the end. Florencia and Azzurra, you developed this gender atlas for Milano, and I'm always looking for tools that we can somehow manage with them to make the world better and to make the living better. So what happened with the atlas? Is somebody using the atlas? Is the planning department, are they looking at it? Did it change?
Well, actually, let's say the Gender Atlas, we started in Milan, and that has, I think, contributed to a discussion around these issues, let's say, open, the discussion on that. So, was not like that immediate. We had to, let's say, present it so much everywhere in Italy and abroad for the municipality to actually understand that we made that work for them, actually. No? So it was slow, but in, let's say, 2 years, there was a moderate interest, I would like to say. So we started to do some projects after, because they came to us and saying, so you highlight many aspects, no, with the atlas. What can we do? No, can we do something about it? No. So we started doing some participatory processes. Like one let's say, quite interesting project was last year, because in Milan there is this issue about insecurity. It's very big, especially it's very pumped by the media, the fact that the city is completely unsafe for women. There's a lot of TikTokers saying, I'm so scared. I mean, we are not saying that things don't happen, no, but you always have to put things in numbers. So as Elena was saying before, like 80% of violence of women happen by people that they know, not the unknown, no? So, but this idea, and we have made a work after specifically on this issue, no? So the idea of stressing that the city is unsafe for women is actually is a mean for pushing them back in the homes and reinforcing that idea that the space for a woman is a home and not the public space, okay? But also is a very strong base for xenophobic, let's say, anti-migrant, let's say, policies, no? Because
this is working perfect.
Yes. Because we should be, let's say, afraid of what we don't know, who we don't know, and not who we know. Actually, no. So let's say, but the municipality somehow had this pressing issue of the perception of unsafety and so on, and so let's say, besides putting the police, because they did put the police, but they asked us to do a participatory process in 15 neighborhoods in Milan, asking women, what made them feel unsafe, and think collectively of solutions. No? So this was made at the city scale. And right now we are actually at the phase 2 of that, all the participatory processes of listening to women, because at least a little part of all the things that they said, because this produced like a massive report of a very detailed, street by street, like here is missing a lamp, here is missing a bench, like very simple things at a cityscape. And now we are trying to, let's say, put to the ground a little bit of what emerged with the collaboration of the electricity agency and a company in Milan. We are now working with 2 lighting designers to do 2 projects of a lighting design in public space with a gender perspective, meaning this is in Stazione Centrale and in Corvetto neighborhood, which is a very popular multi-ethnic, let's say, neighborhood, meaning that we do a gathering, let's say a listening group of women. So based on their experience, everyday life experience, we together, let's say, think about how this lighting project could be, because lighting is one of the aspects that always emerges as one of the things that makes spaces feel insecure. We always say it is not only or not just lighting, because as Jane Jacobs was saying, I mean, you don't need a light if there is nobody looking at the space, So it is not enough to rethink lighting, but to rethink lighting as a mean to, let's say, trigger or to, let's say, revitalize a community. That's what we are trying to do. So putting together the participatory aspect to the actual transformation of space. So this is in Milan. And then we're doing many atlases in various cities in Italy right now. So Parma, Ferrara, Verona, Rome.
It is very interesting because theoretically I always thought that we are already beyond the safety discussion, and we are now at the liberating discussion, a liberty discussion, but it is not. And it's the life is for women and men and trans persons not the same in public space, and so there's still a lot to do, it seems. So, you say?
Yeah, because of the environmental reasons, we are now discussing the same thing in Vienna, because the Umweltanwaltschaft, the environmentalists want to turn off the lights. What's actually happening in France, that at 10 o'clock they turn off all lights because of the birds, so that birds find it easier to nest. And I always say I like birds a lot, yeah, But the city is made, and in Vienna we're fighting also for the lighting, and we agreed on that the pathways and bike lanes are never, those lights stay on the entire night and they are not dimmed. And the lights only for the roads, for the cars, they can be dimmed at 10 and at midnight. Because a car is a lightning vehicle and a safe vehicle. Because also for you have to explain to the environmentalists, if you turn off all the lights, then people will drive cars, because how else will they move at night? So this is not what they want. And now we're discussing in very great detail what sort of lighting causes light pollution, and it's not the public lighting, it's the private lighting that lights up hotels, but we have to have drone flights analyzing where the light pollution comes from, so that the pavement lighting is now safe, and it only causes 23% of the light pollution, and the rest is caused by private lights. So we're writing a paper asking the private people to turn off the lights for the birds, but the lights on the pathways, sidewalks, and on the bike lanes will remain turned on. But this is, the backlash is coming from all sides, all the time. This is about gender planning. Whenever you've agreed on something, you can be sure you always have to fight for it, because nobody's thinking in the technical departments, hardly anybody's thinking of these everyday aspects. So there's, on all aspects, you have to start discussing all over again.
If I can, many times when we develop our participatory processes on this topic, lighting emerges as a very important matter, and people tell us, women tell us, that plaza makes me feel insecure because it's dark. Then you go there and it's not dark at all. And you understand that, we use the narrative related to lighting to talk about something that we actually don't understand much. We are just afraid, no? Exactly. And we are afraid because every day we read that something happened in our public space, and also because people that uses public space is not exactly what we would like to see, because we see a lot of poverty, we see a lot of people that is different from us, and every day we hear that they are the problem, So it's interesting because when you open up the door of racism let's say racism, trying not to leave people saying free to say everything, but you understand that the problem actually is not lighting. It's something else, and it's related to, narrative, mostly. Because I don't know, I live in Parma, actually, not in Milan, since not many years, and I feel that in Parma nothing happens. It's really flat. I don't know, it's a basic, normal city of province in Italy. And instead, people is really scared to go out. In the evening, they are scared of young people, because now young people in Italy are mixed. Finally, second generation, third generation. So they see groups of maybe mixed young people in public space, listening to music and maybe smoking some joints or whatever. And that's exactly what we were doing when we were young in public space, and it was okay until, we were white and we were, everyone very similar to each other. And today that changed, but it's not only an Italian problem. I think it's an at least European problem. We didn't deal with the internal racism we have. And in Italy, more than other countries, we connect in our minds the blackness to the poverty, to the need of something, to criminality, And it's very difficult in Italy for someone coming from the outside, not being white, because I come from the outside too, but I'm white and I'm lucky, because you don't see that I wasn't born in Italy. But when you have this kind of condition that you can't change, it's really difficult to emancipate from that condition. So maybe even if you have a stable work, you can't access home, because nobody is going to rent a house to you. And so it many times happens that people with a job but a dark skin live in the street. because they can't find a house. This is, I think, one of the biggest problems we have in this historical moment we are going through and we are not dealing with, and it's going to be always bigger, because there's no other way in the future.
Yeah, but also it's very difficult also among the left to talk about these things.
Yeah, that's why I try to do it every time.
What do you mean? No, a kind of I don't know, I have to say hypocrisy, maybe, no? That we don't talk about these things, but until these things, like the blackness somehow, no? If they remain unspoken, like it is an unseen problem, as if everything was alright, but it is not, no? So I'm saying that also within like leftist environment, no, there is not that used to speak openly about these things. No? So all of this discourse is taken by the right completely in terms of security and expulsion and all of that. So, but there's also our in terms of left failure to actually address. No, that's why, for example, we insist a lot on the intersectionality of the research. No, we have to take data that address the different kind of oppression, no? Because it is in the intersection of those that you can find the thing. So it's not that easy, because we also face discussion and saying, you're trying to classify, you're trying to marginate. No, we're trying to understand. No, as long as we don't understand the condition, how can we give a response that is fitting to all of those conditions?
And I think one of the important aspects of gender planning is safety. Like, what is safety? What does it mean for a white lady in her 60s? What is safety for a 17-year-old refugee? What is safety for a 25-year-old mother, academically trained, and for a 25-year-old single mom, not well educated? And this safety has so many layers. It has this economic layer, it has the housing layer, very important, and it has the layer on the social layer. Where do you feel? Do you feel threatened by 5 teenagers with black skin? We have the same thing in Vienna. And how do you deal with that? Yeah, because she feels afraid. We have to take that as a fact and work with it, and talk about it very much. Yeah, I'm also. That's why I always say honest. Yeah, we need to discuss what is there, and it shouldn't be there, but it is there. And Vienna is 45% migrant background, and many people are afraid of that. And we just have to take that as a fact and work from there, and not pretend that this is racist and we're not going to talk about it. And that this does not make anything better. Yeah. And also with the housing, this is also a very big problem in communal housing, because they all get apartments, because it's now via computers and online data banks. So everybody gets a home, not depending on their surnames or the skin colors. But this is a problem for the existing tenants that have lived in the house for 40 years. And now all the young tenants, the new tenants, are old migrant families. You need to discuss that and fix rules so everybody is safe. And so they know the neighbors, and they know that the neighbors will help them when they need help at night. And we know that we have elderly ladies that don't leave the house anymore, because there's now all these black people, and they're certainly going to rob them. So they're not leaving the house anymore. And then you have to address these things. And safety is an elementary issue for everybody, and for women especially, because also of the narrative, I think, of the patriarchal narrative, it is always connected to women. When you talk about fear spaces, you always think about women. Men are just as afraid, but they're just not so used to talking about it or being asked about it. And they're also just as endangered.
They are more in danger.
Yeah, they are more endangered in public space, but hardly anybody talks about it.
Be honest.
Yeah, exactly. But this aspect is not discussed so much. The discussion is always then rooted to the women, so they stay home and have to be protected again. And the safety.
It's always complicated to, deal with this topic, trying not to diminish the importance of the perception of fear from one side, and from the other side to be realistic, in data, because, of course, things are contradictory, and they say different things. I mean, we are talking about percentages nonsense, about perception of fear different among men and women, and the number of rates of crime reported are always less every year, and women are less victims of crime in public space. So every year, every time, I mean, it's always been like that, no? And at the same time, we have a problem related to what masculinity means, no? What does being a man and acting like one man means? So those data related to perception of fear many times is related not much as the reality of the perception of fear, but what people can admit. And so we're pretty convinced that even men are scared in public space.
But they don't say.
But they just can't say it, no? It's not, I mean, not in this society, not yet at least.
But Elena, I guess that this kind of fear or this kind of strange narration about fear that doesn't really exist but exists in your head is not a topic in your place, huh? Because you have to live together somehow, and there are so many people from different cultures.
No, I think that inside the space is not.
That's not.
No, this fear is not. I think that it can be considered. It's a assess point. I don't think that people in the neighborhood feel us as a community as a fear, because we exist since years old, and we are open to the neighborhood. And I think that maybe there are right side neighborhoods that think that we are criminal in a sense of stealing private property in the terms of the building. But I don't think that in the neighborhood there is this perception of our community, honestly. Other things is the total stigma which exists on the young people of San Siro, which, for example, attend our boxing course and the hip hop project. So it's totally true that some of us suffered the stigma every time that came out from the space. So I think that the space as a project conquered the trust of the neighborhood under this term of fear, but not all the components of our community. So inside, yes. Outside, no. You know.
But for example, the neighborhood, that there is not the perception that the people from the SMS can rob in their houses, for example. No, it's not at all.
That's astonishing.
Totally no.
Yeah.
I never listen anything about it.
Yeah.
Never. Maybe you are abusive. I pay for my house. Why you don't pay for your house? But this is.
I'm with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're welcome.
There is the example of one really old lady that passed 15 years. You are thief. You're thief because you steal your house. You are. And now she is under eviction. And so, she asked for help. I am not loud, but I laugh. But it's quite.
Question regarding the level of representation, because you had spoken before of the government of Renzi making a change. So is it all lies everything within planning? So is planning the key? That means on a city level or a regional level where you can dictate some new rules, or you need a political representation for certain problems which can just be solved politically on a different level? And is there any party which is going, I mean, we have a party in Vienna which is going for social housing, but is there any political representation which is going for these kind of models? Or is it on such a low scale that planning can solve it within the autonomy of planning? You know what I mean? So are there some kind of
We know
rules
what you mean.
where you need political representation and it would change something forever?
No, the problem I was thinking before, I mean, is that in Italy we have the extremes, that can access to this experience of community. From one side, this kind of opportunity or a condition coming from the grassroots and from a struggle condition, and from the other side, people with a very good economical condition that can have a plan, to maybe build a group of friends, buy a place and renovate it exactly as they want, and then they live together forever, happily. And in the middle, there is more or less nothing, No, yeah, this is the problem, actually, because also in a co-housing project, for example, for example, in a public co-housing project, in Italy there are many. Actually, you don't decide who you are living with. Many times you didn't decide to live in that kind of situation, and you just ended up there because they gave you, an apartment, maybe in a co-housing in Bologna, for example. And it doesn't make much sense, because actually, if you have the idea to live in a community, you would like to live with also your people. I mean, the people you love, And so this idea to create the possibility to imagine, for example, getting all together, which is a huge matter, because we are going to get old alone. We don't have kids and whatever. I mean, I think it's really necessary today to start making this possibility easier also for people who is not rich, who don't have so many economical possibilities.
What do you mean, to live in a co-housing project, or?
For example, but made of a group which is created before. More or less like Rosa.
Yeah, but this was the problem then. It was inside of subsidized housing. Then you have to give 1/3 of the apartments to the open market. Then they were not feminist, and they were not interested in the community, and then the problems emerged. So I have another dream. I have the dream that there must be something in between, and we should be able to create a kind of empathy also in a group which is more disparate and not so homogeneous. If we always stay in our bubbles and everybody is living in its own bubble housing project, I think we will never be changed somehow, our mind. But maybe it doesn't work. I don't know.
I don't know. I think that people should,
at least, as you said, there should be the possibility for all people who want to live together. This would be already something, yeah.
No, yeah, but also, I mean, people should choose to live in that situation. I mean, you can't expect that someone ended up in a co-housing and then participates to the activities, to the assembly or whatever. I mean,
it can force a bit. Architecture can force a bit, or it can. It's the way how you place community spaces, infrastructure, corridors, elevators, gardens. I think there's also something in between, but that's again how much do we want to do and how much do we want to control. And we slowly should come to an end. It's already a quarter to the close of the whole park.
Yeah.
We didn't even look at the cards.
Oh no.
talk about it.
Maybe we do a quick end round. Julia.
Yeah, it was super interesting. Thank you for sharing. And I feel, in Vienna, this is so far away, this bottom up. Everything about it. It's like it's always this sort of handshake, and you have associations, and then you come into Viennese housing, and then it's all fire. So it was very inspiring. Thank you so much. And I think in terms of gender, I think we have to discuss further what is the actual because we always got into the general topics, and I think got some ideas, but yeah, I think we just to scratch the surface. So I'm very motivated to continue this dialogue in one form or the other. And thank you so much for hosting. It was very super interesting.
Yeah, I would say the same to you actually, because let's say, we always look at Vienna as our dream model, something that somehow, we know that we will never reach, but somehow motivates us, the existence of a model like this motivates us to kind of change things in that direction, say asking, for a little bit more effort, to our governments somehow. I don't know. So I thank you for being here and for bringing this model. Yeah.
Yeah, before thanking, I wanted to say something about the fact that when we talk about feminist housing or feminism in general, in the end we talk about care. And some way, we continue associating some way femininity and care work, care duties, taking care of the others, no? But I think that it's okay some way if we are aware of the fact that we do this association because as women we have given kind of a superpower in our education, which is actually taking care of the others. I mean, it's anecdotal. I grew up in a very sexist family made of a lot of people, and it was really different to the way we were educated, men and women. And today, me and my sister and I, we are able to live, and my brothers no.
That was actually good, you say?
Yeah,
Maybe you need to help your brother.
Yeah, exactly. What happens that my brothers expect us to take care of them, no? And yeah, they're alone. But what I wanted to say is that we need to share this superpower, and we need to try to educate our people around us besides their gender, that care is important. Taking care of the others is the only way, to have a future together. So thank you for sharing everything.
Yeah, so thank you in general for hosting, for organizing, for inviting and sharing. Also for me it was really interesting because sometimes there is this big gap between grassroots experiences and research experiences or policy making experiences. And I think that this gap creates a lot of problems because democratizing, expertizing, in my opinion, is really relevant to produce a real change. Because if not, maybe there is the willingness, but not some kind of knowledges, or there are knowledges that remain without material condition to realize themselves. So I think that this kind of networking activities are example of how will be a good idea to manage mutual learning. And so thank you.
So I will read one quote of this nice card. To me, but it's in English. To me, family is people who make me feel safe and who understand me. So this is even beyond co-housing, in my opinion. So it's maybe something kind of care housing. And one is in Italian, and I read it now. To me, family is rifugio, comunione, rispetto, reciproce, amore, compromessi, percorso, casa, libertà. Michael?
We don't want to end with the Casa della Libertà.
No, there are two words. There was a Beistrich in between.
I've learned a lot, as always, with these kind of viewpoints, which came out from a different kind of experience, obviously, of the world. And for me, it was always interesting that the Greek called oikos, the household economy, and so they took away from this kind of care this course and made it very, very fundamental to understand what is the real base of a society. And and I think, so yes, maybe from outside Vienna is this kind of lighthouse model, but we started the Pavilion exactly because for us it had something which we were missing, and we found emancipation, desire, and transformation of the subject which are going through a process somewhere else. And for me it was interesting that we find an illuminated administration, and Juli is one of the part of that. So that's what you normally never find in any kind of a city, that the illumination goes through certain subjects in that which are organizing things, but not always in the subject of care, which is a little bit, for me, that is something which, or at least I think we are missing. And therefore, for us, it's really an existentialist question behind, is there a danger in a certain kind of system, because it does not create this kind of subject anymore. And whereas talking with you and with the experience, I think it's absolutely fundamental to understand it as a different kind of parcours. And it would be interesting. Yeah, I think the big question is really, can we scale emancipation? Or is this, or as Silvia Federici would say, the common has always to be a parcours of struggle by yourself, no? So that's the illusion of our society, that we can give you the parcours already made, no? And I think that's really the problem. And in migration, or also what we showed here in one of the slides, in the inclusion of what is work in social housing by poverty, you see that those who really struggle create some really fundamental avant-garde questions. And for us, this is important, how to go over that. But yeah, a lot of questions would be so lovely to go further, and we will have time. Not today, but it was really, really a learning moment for me. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now with the rest of the daylight.
As they say, with the light out.